I never thought I'd see the day when my son-in-law would banish me to clean our filthy basement while he lounged in my recliner, drinking my imported tea. But that day came, and little did he know I'd already executed the perfect plan that would leave him responsible for every utility bill in the house he thought he was slowly taking from me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Barbara Johnson. At 62, I expected to be enjoying my well-earned retirement in the cozy Maple Grove home I'd spent 30 years paying off. After losing my husband Richard to a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, I'd carefully managed our modest savings and pension, creating a stable, if not luxurious life for myself. The small garden I'd nurtured in our backyard had become both my passion and a small source of income, as the organic herbs I grew had gained popularity at our local farmers market. My garden wasn't the only thing I'd carefully tended over the years. I'd poured my heart and soul into raising my daughter Emma, making sure she had opportunities I never did. When Richard was alive, we'd scrimped and saved to send her to college, missing vacations and driving old cars so she could graduate, debt-free. When she brought home Tyler Wilson during her senior year, we welcomed him with open arms. He was charming, with an easy smile, and what seemed like genuine interest in our family. When they married 2 years later, I was overjoyed for my daughter, believing she'd found someone who would cherish her as much as I did. How painfully ironic that the happiness I'd wanted for Emma would become the weapon Tyler would use against me. It began innocently enough. Last winter, a particularly violent storm had damaged the roof of their rental apartment complex. "It's going to take at least 3 months to repair everything properly," Emma explained over the phone, her voice tight with stress. "The landlord is letting everyone out of their leases, but finding a new place in this market is impossible." "Why don't you two stay with me until you find something?" I offered without hesitation. My 3-bedroom bungalow had felt too empty since Richard passed. The guest room is always ready, and you know how much I'd love the company. Their gratitude seemed genuine when they arrived with suitcases and boxes, promising to help with chores and expenses. Emma hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thanks, Mom. We won't be a burden, I promise." Tyler carried in their belongings, complimenting the recent kitchen renovation Richard and I had completed before his death. The first few weeks were actually wonderful. The house felt alive again. Emma and I cooked together like we used to when she was younger. Tyler fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom that I'd been meaning to address. We shared meals at the oak dining table Richard had crafted by hand, and for the first time in years, laughter filled my home again. Looking back, I should have recognized the shift when it began. The subtle comments, so easily dismissed individually, formed a pattern I was too trusting to see. "Barbara, have you ever thought about updating this living room?" Tyler asked, one evening gesturing to my comfortable but admittedly well-worn furniture. "These pieces have seen better days." "Mom's style is very traditional," Emma added with a little smile that seemed almost apologetic. I laughed it off. When you've had furniture survive 2 large dogs and a growing child, you develop a certain attachment to it. 2 days later, I returned from my weekly watercolor class to find my living room rearranged. The sofa had been pushed against a different wall, my reading lamp was gone, and a large gaming monitor now dominated the corner where Richard's bookshelf had stood. "We thought we'd freshen things up a bit," Emma explained when she saw my expression. "The living room gets so much more light this way." "And we stored the bookshelf in the basement for now," Tyler added. "It was taking up so much space, and honestly, who reads physical books anymore?" I wanted to object. Those books were Richard's prized collection, but the eager look on Emma's face made me swallow my protest. "It's different," was all I managed. This pattern continued with increasing frequency. My carefully organized kitchen cabinets were rearranged because It makes more sense this way. My bedroom television was replaced with a smart TV because you're really missing out on streaming, Mom. The framed family photos that had lined the hallway were relocated to make room for Emma and Tyler's wedding portraits. Each change was presented as helpful, as an improvement to my outdated home and lifestyle. And perhaps because I desperately wanted to maintain my relationship with my daughter, I accepted these changes without serious objection. After all, wasn't compromise part of sharing a home? But then came the conversation that made my blood run cold. It was a crisp fall afternoon, about 4 months after they'd moved in. I was returning from the farmer's market, where I'd spent the morning selling my herbs and homemade jams. As I approached my house, I heard raised voices through the partially open kitchen window. I paused on the stone path, not intending to eavesdrop, but drawn by the unusual sound of conflict. It's been 4 months, Emma. 4. And we're still living with your mother like we're broke college students. Tyler's voice was sharp with frustration. I know, Emma sighed. But the rental market— Forget the rental market, Tyler interrupted. We haven't even been looking, and you know it. A heavy silence followed, during which I stood frozen beside my garden, the basket of unsold herbs suddenly heavy in my arms. What exactly are you suggesting? Emma finally asked, her voice smaller than I was used to hearing. I'm saying we need to be strategic here. Your mom is rattling around in this house all by herself. It's too much for her to maintain as she gets older. Mom is perfectly capable. For now, Tyler cut in. But she's in her 60s, Emma. How long before the stairs become a problem? Or the yard work? Besides, the house is paid off. Do you have any idea what this place is worth in today's market? My heart began to pound so loudly I was certain they must hear it through the window. So, what exactly are you suggesting? Emma repeated, a new note of uncertainty in her voice. We convince her to sign the house over to us, Tyler said plainly. We tell her it's for estate planning purposes, to avoid probate later, whatever. Then we help her find a nice little senior apartment, something manageable. She would never agree to that, Emma protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Everyone has their pressure points, babe. Your mom would do anything for you. We just need to make her believe this is what's best for everyone. My herb slipped from my grasp, the basket landing with a soft thud on the grass. I quickly collected it, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grasp the wicker handle. Taking several deep breaths, I composed myself before walking through the front door as if I'd heard nothing. Great market day, I announced with forced cheerfulness as I entered the kitchen. Emma and Tyler turned to me with identical smiles that now seemed calculated rather than warm. How was the market, Mom? Emma asked, her voice perfectly normal. Wonderful, I lied, placing my basket on the counter. I'm a bit tired, though. Think I'll go lie down for a bit. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed Richard and I had shared for 30 years, and tried to process what I'd just heard. Had I misunderstood? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Was there some innocent explanation for what had sounded like a conspiracy to take my home? But as I replayed the conversation in my mind, the reality became impossible to deny. My daughter and son-in-law had moved in with no intention of leaving. Worse, they were actively plotting to displace me from my own home. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I had resolved to confront them directly. Clear communication had always been the foundation of my relationship with Emma. Surely, this was all a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with an honest conversation. I waited until breakfast, when the three of us were seated around the kitchen island, my warm, inviting kitchen that Tyler had recently informed me was desperately in need of updating. I wanted to ask about your apartment search, I began carefully, stirring honey into my tea. It's been 4 months now. How is that progressing? Emma and Tyler exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my worst fears. It's complicated, Emma hedged. The market is really tight right now. And to be honest, Tyler added, we've discovered some issues with our credit that are making landlords hesitant. We're working on clearing those up. I see, I said, keeping my tone neutral. That sounds serious. Perhaps I could help review your finances? Before I retired, I worked in banking for 30 years. Another glance between them, this one tinged with alarm. That's sweet, Mom, Emma said quickly. But Tyler has it under control. He's been working with a financial advisor. Well then, I persisted. Perhaps I could come with you to some apartment viewings? I know the area so well I might spot a good opportunity you'd miss. We've actually been focusing on the online search for now, Tyler said smoothly. Most places have virtual tours these days. How convenient, I murmured, taking a sip of my tea. That evening, after they'd gone out to dinner with friends, I did something I never thought I'd do. I searched through their belongings. The invasion of privacy went against everything I believed in, but I needed to know the truth. In the guest room closet, behind a row of Tyler's expensive suits, I found a stack of financial documents, credit card statements showing balances of over $50,000 spread across multiple cards, investment account statements showing aggressive stock market gambles that had apparently failed spectacularly, a letter from Tyler's employer, the prestigious financial firm he'd so often bragged about, warning about performance issues and excessive absences. But most disturbing of all was a folder containing printouts about quitclaim deeds and transfer of property between family members. One page had notes in Tyler's handwriting. Convince B to sign his gift, tax advantages, health concerns. They weren't just opportunistically taking advantage of my hospitality. They were actively planning to take my home. I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and retreated to my bedroom, my mind racing. The Barbara Johnson of a year ago would have been devastated, paralyzed by the emotional betrayal. But something had hardened in me since Richard's death. I had survived losing the love of my life. I could certainly deal with this. The next day, I called my oldest friend, Susan Miller, who had retired from her law practice just last year. Can we meet somewhere private? I asked. I need legal advice and I don't want Emma or Tyler to know. Susan suggested her home, and that afternoon I sat in her sunroom, pouring out the whole sordid story. Those ungrateful little... Susan caught herself. Sorry, but this makes my blood boil. Taking advantage of you after everything you've done. For Emma, I need to know my options, I said. Legally, where do I stand? Susan's expression turned thoughtful. The house is solely in your name, correct? I nodded. Richard and I paid it off 3 years before he died. And there's no financial entanglement with them? They're not contributing to the mortgage or property taxes. No, they occasionally buy groceries, but that's it. Then legally, you're on solid ground. You can ask them to leave at any time. They have no claim to your property. She paused. But Barbara, this isn't just a legal issue. This is your daughter. The pain I'd been suppressing threatened to surface. I know. That's what makes this so difficult. Susan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You need to protect yourself, but you also need to be strategic. From what you've told me, Tyler is the driving force here. Emma might not fully understand what she's participating in. That distinction gave me the first glimmer of hope I'd felt since overhearing their conversation. Perhaps Emma could be made to see the truth before it was too late. What would you suggest? I asked. Document everything, Susan advised. Keep records of any conversations about the house, any changes they make without permission, any financial irregularities you notice. But more importantly, develop an exit strategy for yourself that doesn't depend on them doing the right thing. Over the next week, I began quietly documenting everything while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. I noted the date and time. When Tyler suggested I shouldn't bother maintaining my upstairs sewing room because you hardly use it anyway. I recorded when Emma mentioned that their friends had helped their parents downsize into the most adorable senior community. But the most alarming development came when I discovered my bank statement showed several small withdrawals I hadn't made. $200 here, $300 there, totaling nearly $3,000 over the past 2 months. The withdrawals had been made using my debit card, which had mysteriously disappeared last month before Emma helpfully ordered me a replacement. When I quietly checked with my bank, they confirmed the withdrawals had been made using the correct PIN. A PIN that only Emma knew besides myself, because I'd shared it with her years ago for emergencies. That was when I realized I couldn't wait any longer. Whatever loyalty Emma still felt toward me was being steadily eroded by Tyler's influence. I needed to act before I lost everything. The next morning, while Emma and Tyler were still sleeping, I made 3 important phone calls. The first was to my bank, where I opened a new account and transferred the majority of my funds, leaving only enough in the original account to avoid suspicion. The second call was to a locksmith, scheduling them to come the following week when Emma and Tyler would be attending a friend's wedding. The third call was to the utility companies that serviced my home. That evening, Tyler made his move. "Barbara," he began during dinner, his voice taking on the condescending tone I'd come to recognize as his managing Barbara voice. "Emma and I have been talking, and we're concerned about you." "Oh?" I took a sip of water, keeping my expression neutral. "We've noticed you seem to be having more trouble with the stairs lately." This was a complete fabrication. I climbed the stairs several times daily without issue. "And the house maintenance is clearly becoming overwhelming," Emma added, not quite meeting my eyes. "Remember how upset you were when the gutters needed cleaning last month?" I had been upset because Tyler had promised to help clean them, then disappeared for the day, leaving me to hire an emergency service at premium rates. "We've been thinking," Tyler continued, placing his hand over Emma's on the table, "that it might make sense for you to consider a smaller place, something more manageable." "Like what?" I asked mildly. "There's that lovely senior community over in Westridge," Emma said brightly. "Pine Meadows? They have activities, dining options, people your age." "And what would happen to this house?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well," Tyler smiled, "it would make sense for us to take it over. That way it stays in the family. We could give you a fair price, of course." "Based on?" I pressed. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "We'd have to consider the necessary updates, the current market." "It would be a private sale," Emma interrupted. "No real estate commissions, no stranger living in your home." "I see," I said. "And how do you propose to pay for this house, given your credit issues?" Their startled expressions confirmed they had no idea I knew about their financial problems. "We'd get a mortgage, of course," Tyler recovered quickly. "Rates are good right now." I doubted they could qualify for a mortgage given what I'd seen in their financial documents, but I simply nodded. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course," Emma said, relief evident in her voice. "Take your time. We just want what's best for you, Mom." "I know you do, dear," I replied. And in that moment, I genuinely wasn't sure if my daughter was deliberately deceiving me, or if she had convinced herself this was actually for my benefit. That night, I put the second phase of my plan into action. While Emma and Tyler were downstairs watching TV, I carefully packed a small bag with essential documents, irreplaceable mementos, and enough clothes for a few days. I hid the bag in the back of my closet, ready for a quick departure if necessary. The following day brought the most painful escalation yet. I returned from my garden to find Tyler in my home office. Really just a small nook off the kitchen, where I kept household records and my computer. "Barbara!" He seemed startled to see me. "I was just looking for the Wi-Fi password. Emma thought you might have it written down in here." But the drawer he was hastily closing contained my property. Tax records and house deed, not anything related to internet access. "The password is taped to the bottom of the router," I said calmly, "as it has been since we set it up 3 years ago." "Right," he smiled unconvincingly. "I forgot." Later that day, I found Emma alone in the kitchen and decided to make one last attempt to reach my daughter without direct confrontation. "Emma, honey, do you remember when you were 16 and that boy, what was his name, pressured you to skip school to go to that concert in the city?" She looked up from her phone, confused by the change of subject. "Jason Miller?" "Vaguely. Why?" "Do you remember what I told you when you asked for my advice?" She thought for a moment. "You said never to let someone else's priorities become my necessities." "Exactly." I held her gaze. "It was true then, and it's true now. I just want to make sure you're making choices that reflect your priorities, not someone else's." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, guilt, uncertainty. But before she could respond, Tyler walked in, and the moment was lost. The following week, Emma and Tyler left for their friend's wedding 3 hours away. They'd be gone overnight, the perfect opportunity for me to implement my plan. The locksmith arrived promptly at 9 a.m., changing all the exterior locks on the house. At 10 a.m., Susan came over to help me reorganize the basement, the final piece of my strategy. By noon, we had transformed the cluttered space into a minimally habitable area, with an old futon mattress, a small table and chair, and enough clear floor space to move around. "Are you sure about this, Barbara?" Susan asked as we surveyed our work. "It seems extreme." "What's extreme is planning to steal your mother's home," I replied. "This isn't about revenge. It's about creating a situation where the truth becomes unavoidable." When Emma and Tyler returned the next day, they discovered they couldn't enter the house with their keys. When I let them in, I calmly explained that I'd had security concerns and changed the locks, providing them each with a new key. Tyler seemed suspicious but said nothing. Emma accepted my explanation without question. That evening, I served a special dinner, Richard's favorite pot, roast with all the trimmings. As we ate, I casually mentioned that I'd been thinking about their suggestion regarding the house. "I'm not ready for Pine Meadows," I said, "but I do think there are some changes we could make to improve our living situation here." They exchanged hopeful glances. "You two should take the master bedroom," I continued. "It makes sense since there are 2 of you. I'll move into the smaller guest room." "Are you sure, Mom?" Emma asked, though she couldn't quite hide her excitement. "Absolutely. In fact, I've already started moving some of my things." Tyler raised his glass. "To new arrangements that work for everyone." If only he knew what I had actually arranged. They moved into the master bedroom the very next day, eagerly accepting the larger space with its ensuite bathroom and walk-in closet. I pretended to settle into the guest room, while secretly maintaining access to all my important belongings. A week later, the first utility bill arrived, addressed to Tyler Wilson, not Barbara Johnson. "There must be some mistake," he said, showing me the envelope at breakfast. "This is addressed to me." "Is it?" I asked innocently. "How strange. Perhaps you should call them to sort it out." When he did, he discovered that all the utilities, electricity, gas, water, internet, had been transferred to his name during the past week. The customer service representative helpfully informed him that the request had been made by the homeowner, Barbara Johnson, who had explained that her son-in-law would be assuming responsibility for all household expenses. The look on his face when he returned to the kitchen was priceless. "Did you change all the utilities to my name?" he demanded. "I did," I replied calmly. "Since you and Emma have been so concerned about helping me manage things, I thought this would be one less worry for me," But, he sputtered, these are in my name. I'm responsible for paying them. Yes, I agreed. That's how responsibility works. Emma looked confused. Mom, we can't just take over your bills. That's not fair. Oh, I think it's perfectly fair, I countered, especially considering what I overheard 4 weeks ago about your plans to take over my house. The color drained from both their faces. You were eavesdropping on us? Tyler's voice rose defensively. I was returning home and happened to hear you discussing how to pressure me into signing over my house and moving me into a senior facility, I corrected. Just as I happened to find the documents about property transfers in your closet, and just as I happened to notice the unauthorized withdrawals from my bank account. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Mom, it's not what you think. I sincerely hope it's not, I interrupted. I hope there's some explanation other than my daughter and her husband plotting to take advantage of my generosity and manipulate me out of my home. But based on the evidence, I'm struggling to find an alternative interpretation. Tyler's expression hardened. You had no right to go through our things. And you had no right to go through my office drawer looking for my deed, I countered. Or to use my debit card without permission, or to plan how to pressure me out of the home I built with your father, I added, looking directly at Emma. Emma was openly crying now. Tyler said it was for your own good, that you'd be happier in a place designed for seniors, that we could take better care of you if we had the house. And you believed that? I asked softly. After watching me tend my garden every day? After seeing me climb those stairs without issue? After knowing how much this home, filled with memories of your father, means to me. The shame on her face suggested she hadn't fully confronted the reality of their plan until this moment. Tyler, however, showed no such remorse. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting to a conversation you misunderstood. Am I? I picked up a folder from the counter and removed several papers. These are copies of my bank statements showing withdrawals I never made. This is a photograph of the property transfer documents I found in your closet. And this, I said, pulling out the final paper, is a notice I received yesterday about a credit card application submitted in my name, which I never authorized. His face went pale. Now, I continued, here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. First option, you both move out within 1 week. I'll forgive the money that was taken from my account, and we can work toward rebuilding our relationship from a more appropriate distance. And the second option? Tyler asked tightly. You can move into the basement, I said. I've set up a space for you down there. You'll continue paying all the utilities that are now in your name, plus rent, of $800 per month. You'll have limited access to the main floor of the house during specified hours, and no access to my bedroom, office, or garden without explicit permission. The basement? Tyler exploded. That's outrageous. It's barely finished down there. It's actually quite similar to the senior apartment you were planning to relocate me to, I pointed out. Except the bathroom is shared. This is your mother. Tyler turned to Emma, his voice rising. Are you going to let her treat us like this? Emma looked torn, tears streaming down her face. Did you really take money from Mom's account? Did you apply for a credit card in her name? His silence was answer enough. Mom, Emma said, her voice small. I swear I didn't know about those things. I thought we were just discussing options, possibilities. I never would have let him. Yet you went along with moving me to the master bedroom, I pointed out. You went along with the talk of senior communities. You stood by while Tyler systematically rearranged and took over my home. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was wrong. Where are we supposed to go? Tyler demanded. We can't afford market rent right now. That's not my problem, I replied. Though it might be related to the $50,000 in credit card debt and failed investments I saw statements for. His eyes widened at the realization of how much I knew. You have 1 week to make your decision, I said, standing up. In the meantime, I'll be staying with Susan until you've either moved out or relocated to the basement. I've deactivated your new keys to the house, so don't bother trying to change the locks again while I'm gone. Susan's son is a police officer, and he'll be checking on the property regularly. I picked up my pre-packed bag from where I'd hidden it by the door. Emma, when you're ready to talk, really talk, without Tyler present, you can call me. I love you, but I won't be manipulated or taken advantage of, not even by my daughter. With that, I walked out the door, leaving them stunned at the kitchen table. As I drove to Susan's house, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and something else, pride perhaps. For the first time since Richard died, I had stood up for myself completely, without compromise or uncertainty. Susan was waiting on her porch when I arrived. "How did it go?" she asked, helping me with my bag. "About as well as could be expected," I replied. "I think I got through to Emma, at least partially. Tyler is another story." "And now we wait?" "Now we wait," I agreed. "But on our terms, not theirs." As we settled in her living room with cups of tea, Susan studied my face. "You know, Barbara, Richard would be incredibly proud of you right now." The mention of my late husband brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I hope so. All these years, I thought I was teaching Emma to be strong and independent. Somewhere along the way, I forgot to apply those lessons to myself." "It's not too late," Susan said gently. "In fact, I'd say it's just the beginning." Looking out at Susan's garden, where spring flowers were just beginning to push through the soil, I realized she was right. This painful situation with Emma and Tyler wasn't just an ending. It was the start of a new chapter where I reclaimed my voice, my home, and my future. My son-in-law had tried to make me clean the basement, but I had already changed all the utility bills to his name. More importantly, I had changed myself from someone who could be manipulated into someone who set clear boundaries. Whatever happened, next, that transformation was the true victory. 3 days into my stay at Susan's house, Emma called. Her voice was small, hesitant, so unlike the confident daughter I'd raised. "Mom, can we talk? Just you and me?" I agreed to meet her at the local coffee shop, neutral territory where neither of us would have the home field advantage. When I arrived, Emma was already there, occupying a corner table with 2 steaming mugs. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair hastily pulled back. "I ordered your favorite," she said as I sat down. "Chai tea latte with almond milk." It was a peace offering of sorts, and I accepted it with a small nod. For a moment, we sat in uncomfortable silence, the bustling cafe creating a strange privacy within its ambient noise. "I didn't know about the money, Mom," she finally said, her eyes fixed on her coffee. "Or the credit card application. I swear." "But you knew about the plan to take my house," I replied, keeping my voice gentle despite the hurt that still felt raw. Emma's shoulders slumped. "Tyler said it made financial sense, that we could provide better for you if we weren't throwing money away on rent, that it was what families did, children taking over the family home to care for aging parents. I'm 62, Emma, not 82. I don't need caretaking." "I know that. Rationally, I know that." She looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But Tyler has a way of making things sound so reasonable, so obviously correct, that disagreeing feels like you're being difficult or stupid." I recognized the behavior she was describing. It had a name: gaslighting. The gradual erosion of someone's trust in their own perceptions and judgment. I'd seen it happen to a friend years ago with a manipulative husband, but I'd never imagined my bright, independent daughter would fall victim to it. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. Emma shrugged helplessly. "I don't know. It happened so gradually. When we first got married, Tyler's confidence was what I loved about him. He seemed so sure of everything, so capable. But over time, that certainty became inflexible. His ideas were always right. His plans were always best. She took a shaky breath. And somewhere along the way, I stopped challenging him. It was easier to go along. My heart ached for her. This wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about my daughter losing herself in a relationship that had turned unhealthy. "What happens when you do challenge him?" I asked carefully. She stared into her coffee. "He doesn't yell or anything like that. He just explains why I'm wrong. For hours sometimes, until I'm too exhausted to argue anymore." "And financially? Were you aware of the extent of your debt?" She shook her head. "Tyler handles all our finances. He says it makes sense because of his background in investment banking. I get an allowance for groceries and personal expenses, but I don't have access to our accounts." The control dynamics were becoming clearer, and they disturbed me deeply. This wasn't just about Tyler trying to take advantage of me. He'd been isolating and controlling my daughter in ways I hadn't recognized. "Emma, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be honest with me." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Are you safe with Tyler?" She looked, startled. "He's never hit me, if that's what you're asking." "That's not the only kind of safety," I said gently. "Do you feel free to make your own choices? To disagree? To have your own opinions and friends?" Her silence was answer enough. "What happens now?" she finally asked, squeezing my hand. "With the house? With everything?" "That depends," I said. "What do you want to happen?" For perhaps the first time in years, someone was asking Emma what she wanted, not telling her what she should want. "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't afford a place on my own right now. I've been working part-time at the gallery since we got married because Tyler said my career was less important than supporting his." Another red flag I'd somehow missed. Emma had been a promising curator with a degree in art history before meeting Tyler. "You always have a place with me," I assured her. "But I need to know if you're coming without Tyler, or if you're still a package deal." She looked torn, which broke my heart but didn't surprise me. Manipulative relationships created deep dependencies that weren't easily severed, no matter how toxic they became. "I need time to figure things out," she said finally. "Take whatever time you need," I replied. "But in the meantime, I'm reclaiming my home. The 1-week deadline stands." We parted with a hug that felt different from our embraces of the past few years. More genuine, less performative. As I watched Emma walk away, I realized that this confrontation might ultimately save not just my home, but possibly my daughter as well. When I returned to Susan's house, I found her in animated conversation with Michael Green, the attorney she'd referred me to earlier in the week. At 68, Michael had the distinguished look of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. With silver hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Barbara," Susan greeted me. "Michael was just dropping off those documents you requested. How was coffee with Emma?" "Revealing," I said, settling into an armchair. "There's more going on in her marriage than I realized." "Financial control?" Michael guessed shrewdly. I nodded. "Among other things." "Unfortunately common," he said. "I've seen it countless times. One spouse maintains complete control of finances, leaving the other partner vulnerable and dependent. It's a form of abuse, though many don't recognize it as such." "She doesn't have access to their accounts," I confirmed. "Gets an allowance. Like a child." Susan made a disgusted sound. "That explains why she went along with his schemes. She probably has no idea what options she actually has." "Which brings us to these," Michael said, tapping a folder on the coffee table. "I've drawn up the documents you requested, Barbara. A formal notice to vacate, a new will explicitly excluding Tyler from any inheritance claims, and paperwork to create a trust for your assets that would benefit Emma but be protected from Tyler's access." I'd been busy during my days at Susan's, planning not just my immediate response to Tyler's manipulations, but my long-term financial security. The trust had been Michael's suggestion, a way to ensure Emma would eventually receive her inheritance while protecting those assets from Tyler's control. The new locks and transferred utilities were a good start, Michael continued. But these legal protections will make your position even stronger. Do you think they'll leave willingly? Susan asked. Tyler won't, I said with certainty. His entire plan depends on maintaining access to my home and resources. Emma, I'm less sure about. If they refuse to vacate, we can file for formal eviction, Michael explained. It might take several weeks to complete the legal process, but with your documentation of financial exploitation, we could potentially expedite it. And in the meantime? I asked. In the meantime, you reclaim your space however you can. The utility transfer was brilliant. It establishes that Tyler has accepted some responsibility for the household, which actually weakens any claim he might try to make that he's just a guest you can't summarily evict. The next day, day 4 of my self-imposed exile, I returned to my home in the middle of the afternoon when I knew both Emma and Tyler would be out. I had given them a week to decide between leaving or relocating to the basement, but I wasn't going to wait passively for their decision. I systematically went through the house, reclaiming my space room by room. I returned Richard's books to a new bookshelf I'd purchased on the way over. I rehung our family photos in the hallway. I reclaimed my office, installing a keyed lock on the door that only I would have access to. In the master bedroom, my bedroom, I found evidence of how completely Tyler and Emma had taken over. My remaining clothes had been pushed to a small section of the closet, the rest filled with Tyler's expensive suits and Emma's dresses. The bedside tables held their books, their charging cables, their water glasses. I didn't remove their belongings. Instead, I simply added a note to the bed. Reminder, 1-week deadline ends in 3 days. Decisions should be communicated to me at Susan's house. I was just finishing my reclamation project when I heard a key in the front door. Expecting Emma, I was surprised when Tyler walked in alone, his expression darkening when he saw me standing in the living room. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "This is my home," I replied calmly. "The real question is, what decisions have you and Emma made about your living arrangements?" His jaw tightened. "Emma's been upset since your little coffee date." "What exactly did you say to her?" "I asked her what she wanted," I said simply. "Maybe you should try it sometime." "Don't give me that passive-aggressive nonsense," he snapped. "I've always put Emma's needs first." "Have you? Or have you decided what her needs should be?" He stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate me. "You think you're so clever with your utility bill trick and your basement ultimatum? But you're forgetting something important, Barbara." "And what's that?" "Emma will choose me," he said with absolute confidence. "When pushed to decide between her husband and her manipulative mother, she'll choose her marriage. And then where will you be? Alone in this big house with no one who cares whether you live or die." The cruelty of his statement was breathtaking, but I refused to show how deeply it cut. "If Emma chooses freely, I'll respect her decision," I said evenly. "But that's the key word, Tyler. Freely. Without manipulation, without financial coercion, without emotional blackmail." His expression shifted, a cold calculation replacing the anger. "You know, there are other ways this could go. Ways that don't involve Emma having to choose at all." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the sudden pounding of my heart. "Of course not," he scoffed. "I'm simply pointing out that at your age, health concerns arise unexpectedly. Cognitive issues, memory problems. Who knows? Emma and I might need to step in to handle your affairs for your own protection." The implied threat was clear. If I didn't back down, he would try to have me declared incompetent. "That's an interesting approach," I said, picking up my purse from the coffee table. You should discuss that strategy with Michael Green. He's an elder law attorney who specializes in fighting fraudulent competency claims. I have an appointment with him tomorrow morning. Tyler's confidence faltered visibly. You're overreacting to this whole situation. All we've tried to do is help you. 3 days, Tyler, I said, walking toward the door. Then I expect either your complete vacancy or your relocation to the basement. If you choose neither, the formal eviction process begins. And just so you know, the documentation of financial exploitation I've already filed with Michael would make an excellent basis for a criminal complaint as well. I left him standing in my living room, his face a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Once in my car, I allowed myself a moment to breathe deeply, calming the adrenaline that had surged during our confrontation. Tyler was more dangerous than I had initially realized. Not physically, perhaps, but certainly in his willingness to use any means necessary to get what he wanted. When I returned to Susan's house, I found her in the backyard, tending to her vegetable garden. Gardening had always been our shared passion, and there was something comforting about the familiar sight of her hands in the soil. "How did it go?" she asked, looking up from the tomato plants she was staking. "I ran into Tyler," I replied, sinking onto the garden bench. "He implied he might try to have me declared incompetent if I don't back down." Susan's expression hardened. "That's elder abuse, plain and simple." "It's an empty threat," I assured her. "I've been documenting everything, and Michael has already prepared a response if Tyler tries anything like that." "Still," Susan said, brushing soil from her hands, "it shows how far he's willing to go. Have you considered getting a restraining order?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to give Emma space to make her own decisions without feeling like I'm forcing her to choose sides legally." "And if she chooses him?" It was the question I'd been avoiding even in my own thoughts. What if, after everything, Emma still chose to side with Tyler? Then at least it will be her choice, I said finally. Not something she was manipulated or coerced into. That evening, Emma called again, her voice strained and distant. "Tyler told me you came to the house today," she said, "that you threatened him with criminal charges." I reminded him of the deadline and the consequences of not meeting it. I corrected gently. "Did he tell you he threatened to have me declared incompetent?" Her sharp intake of breath answered that question. "Mom, this is getting out of control," she said. "Can't we just sit down, all three of us, and work something out?" "We tried that approach," I reminded her. "For 4 months, while Tyler systematically took over my home and plotted to take it permanently. He says you're exaggerating, that you misunderstood." "Emma," I interrupted, "did you check your joint account like I suggested? The credit card statements?" A long silence followed. "Yes," she finally admitted. "There are. Charges I didn't know about. Withdrawals I never made." "And the credit card application in my name?" Another pause. "He says it was just to help build your credit, that he was going to surprise you with it." The excuses were so transparent they would have been laughable if they weren't so manipulative. "Do you believe that?" I asked. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she confessed, her voice breaking. "Everything's so confused. When I talk to you, what you say makes sense. Then Tyler explains things, and that makes sense too, but completely differently." "That's by design," I said gently. "It's called gaslighting, Emma, making you doubt your own perceptions and judgment until you rely completely on his." "He says you're trying to drive a wedge between us," she countered, "that you've always been controlling." The accusation stung, especially because it contained just enough truth to be plausible. Hadn't I always been protective of Emma, especially after Richard died? Maybe I had been too involved, too ready with advice and opinions. "I've made my share of mistakes. As a mother," I acknowledged. "But I've never lied to you, Emma. I've never taken your money without permission. never tried to separate you from people who care about you, never made you doubt your own mind. The line went quiet for so long, I thought we might have been disconnected. I need more time, she finally said, to figure things out. The deadline still stands, I said, hating the firmness in my voice but knowing it was necessary. But whatever you decide about your marriage, you will always be my daughter and I will always love you. After we hung up, I sat on Susan's guest bed staring at the phone, wrestling with doubt. Was I being too harsh? Too inflexible? Was there a middle ground I was missing that might preserve both my boundaries and my relationship with Emma? Susan found me there an hour later, still turning these questions over in my mind. You did the right thing, she said, sitting beside me. Setting boundaries isn't the same as rejection. It feels like I'm forcing her to choose, I confessed. Tyler is the one forcing that choice, Susan corrected. By trying to exploit both of you, he created this situation, not you. What if she chooses him? Susan squeezed my hand. Then you'll still have done the right thing by standing up for yourself. And you'll be here, ready to help her if she eventually sees the truth. The next 2 days passed in a strange limbo. I met with Michael to finalize the legal protections we'd discussed and to prepare for the possibility of an eviction process. I visited my garden daily, tending the herbs that had become both my passion and livelihood. I avoided my house, giving Emma the space to make her decision without additional pressure from me. On the morning of the deadline, I woke early, anxiety tightening my chest. By noon, I would know whether I was facing a painful eviction battle or reclaiming my home under the basement compromise. Neither option felt like a victory, not when both likely meant some form of estrangement from my daughter. At precisely 11 a.m., my phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "We've made our decision," she said without preamble, her voice strangely calm. "And?" I prompted, when she didn't continue. "I'm moving out," she said. "Today, I've already packed my essentials." My heart lurched. "And Tyler?" A long pause. "He doesn't know yet." The implications of her statement slowly sank in. Emma wasn't choosing between me and Tyler. She was choosing herself. "Where will you go?" I asked, already reaching for my car keys. "I called Aunt Joanne in Riverside," she said, referring to my younger sister. "She said I can stay with her until I figure things out." Joanne lived 3 hours away, far enough to make it difficult for Tyler to pressure Emma with his physical presence. "When are you leaving?" I asked. "As soon as I hang up," she replied. "Tyler's at work until 6. I didn't. I couldn't face telling him in person. I understood her decision, even as I worried about the fallout when Tyler discovered her departure. "Do you need help? I can be there in 20 minutes. "No," she said quickly. "I need to do this on my own, but maybe you could meet me at Aunt Joanne's tomorrow. I think we have a lot to talk about." "Of course," I agreed, relief washing over me. "Whatever you need, Emma." After we hung up, I sat for a moment, absorbing what had just happened. Emma was choosing independence. From Tyler, yes, but also from me. It wasn't the outcome I'd expected, but it was perhaps the healthiest one for her. I immediately called Michael. "Emma's leaving Tyler," I told him, "but he'll still be in my house when the deadline hits." "Then we proceed with the formal eviction notice," Michael said. "I can have it served this afternoon." "There's something else," I added. "I'm concerned about how Tyler might react when he discovers Emma's gone. He might become—" I hesitated, not wanting to over-dramatize the situation, but also not wanting to underestimate the potential risk. "Volatile," Michael finished for me. "I understand. I have a colleague who works with the sheriff's department. We can arrange for a civil standby while you reclaim your home. An officer will be present to ensure there's no conflict." I agreed to this plan, feeling both relief and sadness that such precautions were necessary. At 3 p.m., I met Michael and Deputy Wilson at my home. The deputy was a reassuring presence, professional but kind as she explained the process. "I'll remain present while you change the locks again and serve the formal notice," she explained. "If Mr. Wilson becomes confrontational, I'll intervene. Your safety is the priority here." With Deputy Wilson standing by, the locksmith quickly changed the exterior locks. Michael taped the formal eviction notice to the front door, a legal document giving Tyler 72 hours to remove all his belongings from the premises. "Since your daughter has already vacated voluntarily, this notice applies only to Mr. Wilson," Michael explained. "It specifies that he is to remove only his personal property, not any household items or furnishings that belong to the home before his arrival." With the locks changed and notice posted, I thanked Deputy Wilson for her assistance and settled in to wait. The house felt different without Emma's presence, emptier in a way that had nothing to do with the physical space. At 6:15 p.m., Tyler's car pulled into the driveway. I watched through the living room window as he approached the front door, tried his key, then noticed the eviction notice. Even from a distance, I could see his posture change, tension radiating from his shoulders as he read the document. When he began pounding on the door, I took a deep breath and answered, keeping the security chain engaged. "Where is she?" he demanded, his face flushed with anger. "Emma has chosen to leave," I said calmly. "She's safe and has asked for space." "This is ridiculous," he spat. "You can't just lock me out of my home." "This isn't your home, Tyler. It never was." The eviction notice explains the legal process. You have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings. "And where am I supposed to go?" he demanded. "That's not my concern," I replied, echoing the words he'd so callously used. When discussing sending me to a senior facility, "You have 3 days to figure it out." His expression darkened. "You've turned Emma against me. This isn't over." "Actually, it is," I said firmly. "Emma made her own decision, and I've made mine. Any further communication should go through Michael Green's office." I closed the door before he could respond, my heart racing but my resolve firm. Through the window, I watched as he stormed back to his car, pulled out his phone, and began what appeared to be a heated conversation, likely trying to reach Emma. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in over a week. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been since Emma and Tyler had moved in. There was sadness, certainly, for the pain Emma was experiencing, for the family bonds that had been strained, but also a profound sense of rightness. I had protected what was mine, not just my physical home, but my dignity and autonomy. The following morning, I awoke early and drove the 3 hours to Joanne's house. My sister met me at the door with a tight hug. "She's been through the ringer," Joanne warned me quietly. Tyler's called nonstop. She finally turned off her phone. Emma was sitting in Joanne's sunroom, looking simultaneously exhausted and relieved. When she saw me, she stood, her arms wrapping around me in a hug that felt like coming home. "I'm sorry," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening." "You have nothing to apologize for," I assured her. Manipulative people are experts at what they do. We talked for hours, really talked in a way we hadn't in years. Emma revealed patterns of control I hadn't been aware of, how Tyler had gradually isolated her from friends, criticized her career, aspirations, monitored her spending, and rewritten their relationship history to make her dependent on his version of reality. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, communicated better, was more understanding, things would improve, she explained. But the goalposts kept moving. "What made you decide to leave?" I asked. She smiled ruefully. "Believe it or not, it was the utility bills. When you transferred them to Tyler's name, I saw something I'd never seen before. actual panic in his eyes. Not concern for how we'd pay them, but fear that he was losing control of the narrative. It made me wonder what else he'd been controlling that I hadn't recognized. My small act of rebellion had created a crack in Tyler's carefully constructed facade, allowing Emma to glimpse the manipulation beneath. "What happens now?" I asked, echoing the question she'd posed to me at the coffee shop. "I don't know," she admitted. "I need to find a job, a place to live eventually. I need to figure out if my marriage is salvageable or if—" She didn't complete the thought, but she didn't need to. Some broken things couldn't be repaired, and sometimes trying to fix them only led to deeper wounds. "You're welcome to stay with me," I offered. "But I understand if you need your own space right now." "I think I do," she said softly. "I've spent so long being defined by relationship to others, as your daughter, as Tyler's wife, that I'm not sure I know who Emma is anymore." Her insight broke my heart and filled me with pride simultaneously. My daughter was finding her own strength, even in the midst of pain. "Whoever she is," I told her, taking her hand, "I have a feeling she's pretty remarkable." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the strange journey of the past few weeks. What had begun as a simple offer of temporary housing had evolved into a complex reckoning with boundaries, manipulation, and the true meaning of family. I had lost the comfortable illusion of familial harmony, but gained something far more valuable: authentic relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The basement that Tyler had tried to relegate me to had instead become a symbol of my reclaimed power. The utility bills he'd expected me to pay forever had become the first crack in his control over Emma. Sometimes, it seemed, the most effective resistance didn't require grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, just the quiet insistence on owning what was rightfully yours, whether that was a house, a utility bill, or your own sense of self-worth. 3 days later, Tyler removed the last of his belongings from my home, supervised by Deputy Wilson to ensure there were no conflicts. He left without a word, his expensive suits and designer shoes packed into the trunk of his luxury car I now suspected had been financed with credit card debt and manipulated funds. That evening, I walked through my reclaimed house, touching the familiar surfaces that held decades of memories. In the kitchen, I found Emma's favorite mug, left behind in her hasty departure. I placed it carefully in the cabinet, ready for her return, not as a dependent child or an extension of her husband, but as a woman finding her own path. In the garden, my herbs were thriving despite the recent neglect, resilient in the face of changing conditions. As I knelt in the soil, tending to the growing things that had sustained me both financially and spiritually since Richard's death, I felt a profound sense of kinship with these plants. Like them, I had weathered storms and emerged stronger, more deeply rooted in my own truth. Tyler had tried to make me clean the basement, but I had already changed all the utility bills to his name. More importantly, I had changed the power dynamics that had allowed manipulation to flourish. Whatever challenges came next, repairing my relationship with Emma, helping her navigate the difficult decisions ahead, rebuilding the trust that had been damaged, I would face them from a foundation of strength and clarity that could not be taken from me again. The weeks following Tyler's eviction brought a strange mixture of peace and unease to my home. I had reclaimed my space, restored order to rooms that had been overtaken, and was sleeping soundly in my own bedroom again. But Emma's absence left a hollow sensation that no amount of rearranged furniture could fill. We spoke daily, her voice gradually becoming stronger as she found temporary work at an art gallery in Riverside and began therapy sessions that Joanne had encouraged her to attend. The therapist says I was experiencing coercive control, Emma told me during one of our evening calls. It's a pattern that's actually common in financially abusive relationships. How does that make you feel? I asked, careful not to lead her toward any particular conclusion about her marriage. Validated, she admitted. For so long, I thought I was being oversensitive or irrational when things Tyler did made me uncomfortable. Having a name for it, understanding the pattern, it helps. I was relieved to hear the clarity in her voice, but worried about the next phase of her journey. Has Tyler tried to contact you again? Emma sighed. Every day, texts, emails, voicemails. At first, they were angry, accusing me of abandoning him, of betraying our marriage. Then they shifted to apologies, promises to change. Now he's swinging between the two. One minute he's threatening legal action for alienation of affection against you. The next he's begging me to come home so we can work on things. The legal threat didn't surprise me. Tyler's pattern had consistently been to escalate when his control was threatened. Michael says any such claim would be groundless, I assured her. But you should probably forward those threatening messages to your lawyer. I've been documenting everything, she confirmed. Bethany thinks it's important to establish the pattern in case I decide to file for divorce. Bethany Morales was the family law attorney that Michael had referred Emma to, a specialist in cases involving financial abuse and coercive control. The fact that Emma was working with her suggested she was beginning to consider formal separation, though she hadn't explicitly stated this yet. How are things at your end? Emma asked, changing the subject. Has Tyler caused any more problems at the house? I hesitated, not wanting to worry her. Nothing major, I said, which wasn't entirely truthful. The reality was more concerning. 3 times in the past week, I'd returned home to find evidence of attempted entry, scratches around the back door lock, a screen removed from a side window, footprints in the flower bed beneath my bedroom window. Nothing had been taken, and whoever had tried to enter hadn't succeeded, but the attempts were escalating. Deputy Wilson had been incredibly responsive, increasing patrols past my house and taking detailed reports, but without catching someone. In the act, there was little more the sheriff's department could do. At Michael's suggestion, I'd installed a security system complete with cameras and motion-sensing lights, hoping the visible deterrence would discourage further attempts. I didn't share these details with Emma. She was focusing on her own healing, and I didn't want to burden her with additional worries. Instead, I asked about her latest art project, a series of mixed media pieces exploring themes of identity and transformation that she was creating for a small exhibition at the Riverside Community Center. It's the first time I've made art for myself in years, she explained, enthusiasm brightening her voice. Not for a grade, not for someone else's approval, just because I need to express something. After we hung up, I sat on my back porch gazing at the garden, now in full summer bloom. The security lights I'd installed cast harsh shadows across the familiar landscape, necessary protection that nonetheless felt like an intrusion on the peaceful space I'd created. The sound of a car slowing in front of my house caught my attention. I tensed, then relaxed as I recognized Susan's Volvo pulling into my driveway. She had taken to dropping by several evenings a week, ostensibly to check on my garden or share dinner, but we both knew she was providing an additional layer of security through her presence. Mail call, she announced cheerfully, handing me a stack of envelopes as she settled onto the porch swing beside me. I grabbed it on my way in. You really should empty that box more often. Thanks, I said, flipping through the usual mix of bills and advertisements. An official-looking envelope from the county courthouse caught my attention. I tore it open, my stomach tightening as I scanned the contents. What is it? Susan asked, noting my expression. A notice of hearing, I replied, handing her the document. Tyler is petitioning for a financial conservatorship over me, claiming I'm exhibiting signs of cognitive decline and making irrational financial decisions that put me at risk. Susan's face flushed with anger as she read. This is outrageous! On what possible grounds? The transfer of utilities to his name is cited as erratic behavior, I pointed out, a humorless laugh escaping me. Along with my paranoid installation, of security systems and irrational severing of contact with my son-in-law. This won't hold up in court, Susan insisted, not with your documented history of his financial exploitation. It doesn't need to hold up, I said quietly. It just needs to create legal complications and expenses to wear me down. It's about control, not legitimate concern. I called Michael immediately, reading the petition to him over the phone. His response was measured but concerned. This is a retaliatory filing, he concluded. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon in these situations. The good news is, there are clear protocols for competency evaluations. We'll have you assessed by an independent geriatric psychiatrist immediately, which should dispose of any legitimate concerns. And the bad news? I prompted. These proceedings can be time-consuming and expensive, he admitted, which is likely part of Tyler's strategy. He knows your resources aren't unlimited. What about a counter-filing? I asked. For the financial exploitation? Michael was silent for a moment. That's an option, certainly, but it would potentially create complications for Emma. If she's still deciding about her marriage, a criminal complaint against her husband might force her hand prematurely. As much as I wanted to see Tyler face consequences, I couldn't bear the thought of pressuring Emma during her fragile recovery. Let's hold off on that for now, I decided. Focus on defeating this conservatorship nonsense first. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparing for the hearing. Dr. Eleanor Martinez, the independent psychiatrist Michael arranged, conducted a thorough evaluation that included cognitive testing, a review of my financial records, and an assessment of my daily functioning. Her report was unequivocal. I showed no signs of cognitive impairment and was managing my financial affairs with complete competence. If anything, she told me with a wry smile as she completed her evaluation, you're demonstrating above-average financial acumen for someone who's been targeted for exploitation. The protective measures you've taken show excellent judgment, not confusion. I appreciated her validation, but the conservatorship petition had taken a toll. I found myself jumping at noises in the night, checking and rechecking the security system, and waking early with a sense of dread that hadn't been present since the days immediately following Richard's death. Susan noticed the change during our weekly farmers market trip, where I was selling my summer herb harvest. "You're not sleeping," she observed as she helped me set up my booth. "The circles under your eyes could qualify for their own zip code." I attempted a smile. "Charming as always, Susan." "I'm serious, Barbara," she persisted. "This situation is wearing you down. Maybe you should consider getting away for a while, at least until after the hearing." The suggestion caught me off guard. Leave my home? Now? That would look like fleeing, like I have something to hide. Or like you're sensibly removing yourself from a stressful environment, she countered. Dr. Martinez has already conducted her evaluation. The hearing isn't for another 3 weeks. There's no reason you need to sit in that house jumping at shadows until then. I was about to dismiss the idea when a customer approached, ending our conversation. But as I went through the familiar motions of selling my herbs and homemade tinctures, Susan's suggestion took root. Perhaps a change of scenery would help me regain perspective and strength for the battle ahead. That evening, I called Emma to discuss the idea. "I think it's brilliant," she said immediately. "You should come stay with me and Aunt Joanne. We have plenty of room." "I wasn't thinking of Riverside," I admitted. "That might seem like I'm trying to influence you, or like I'm running to your side against Tyler." "Then where?" I hesitated. "I've been considering visiting Silver Springs." Silver Springs was a small coastal town about 4 hours north where Richard and I had often vacationed. We'd always talked about retiring there someday, perhaps buying one of the charming cottages that overlooked the harbor. After his death, I'd set those dreams aside, too painful to pursue alone. The place with the lighthouse Dad loved? Emma's voice softened with recognition. The one you two always talked about retiring to? Yes, I confirmed. There's a small inn there that rents monthly if you're interested in exploring the area, I thought. Maybe it's time to revisit those old dreams, see if they still fit. I think Dad would love that idea, Emma said gently. After consulting with Michael, who assured me a temporary relocation wouldn't negatively impact the hearing as long as I returned for the court date, I made arrangements. The Lighthouse Inn had a small suite available for the next month, a bedroom, sitting area, and kitchenette with a private balcony overlooking the harbor. The owner, Martha Reynolds, remembered me from previous visits with Richard. "We'd be delighted to have you, Mrs. Johnson," she said warmly when I called. "The summer crowd is thinning out now that school's starting, so it's actually perfect timing." Susan helped me prepare for the trip, which we kept deliberately low-key. I didn't announce my plans on social media or change my mailing address. The security system would remain active, and Susan would check on the house regularly, bringing in mail and keeping the garden tended. "Think of it as a reconnaissance mission," Susan suggested as she helped me pack. "You're not running away, you're exploring possibilities for the future." The morning of my departure arrived with a perfect late summer clarity. Crisp air, golden, sunlight, a hint of autumn in the breeze. As I loaded my suitcases into the car, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and melancholy. This house had been my anchor for 30 years, the stage for the most significant chapters of my life. Leaving it, even temporarily, felt momentous. I was just closing the trunk when a sleek black sedan pulled up behind my car, blocking my driveway. Tyler emerged, dressed in the sharp business attire that had once seemed impressive, but now struck me as another aspect of his carefully constructed facade. "Going somewhere, Barbara?" he called, his tone conversational but his posture tense. I kept my expression neutral. "Good morning, Tyler. I have an appointment, so if you could move your car, I'd appreciate it." He made no move toward his vehicle. "An appointment that requires luggage? Looks more like an escape to me." "I'm taking a short trip," I said calmly, "which is perfectly within my rights." "Actually," he said, producing a document from his jacket pocket, "I've filed an emergency motion with the court requesting that you remain in the jurisdiction until the competency hearing. Leaving now could be interpreted as evading court oversight." The bluff was so transparent I almost laughed. "There's no such order, Tyler. If there were, it would have been properly served by the sheriff's department, not handed to me in my driveway by an interested party." His expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Barbara. Running away just proves you have something to hide." "I'm not running anywhere," I replied. "I'm simply choosing how to spend my time until the hearing, a hearing that will conclusively demonstrate that I'm fully competent and that your petition is nothing but a vindictive attempt to regain control." "Where's Emma?" he demanded, changing tactics. "Is she with you? Are you hiding her too?" "Emma is an adult making her own choices," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Now please move your car, or I'll have to call Deputy Wilson to report that. You're blocking my driveway and harassing me." At the mention of law enforcement, Tyler's demeanor shifted. He'd had several encounters with Deputy Wilson during the eviction process, none of which had gone in his favor. "This isn't over," he warned, walking back to his car. "You can't hide from the consequences of your actions." "Neither can you," I replied quietly. I waited until his sedan had disappeared down the street before getting into my car. My hands were steady as I adjusted the mirrors and checked my GPS, but my heart was racing. The confrontation had only strengthened my resolve to get away, to find space where I could think clearly without the constant shadow of Tyler's manipulations. The drive to Silver Springs was exactly what I needed. 4 hours of open road, the landscape gradually transforming from suburban developments to rolling farmland to coastal forests. I played Richard's favorite jazz albums, letting the familiar melodies wash over me as the miles disappeared beneath my wheels. By the time I arrived in Silver Springs, the late afternoon sun was casting a golden glow over the harbor, highlighting the white lighthouse that stood sentinel at the edge of the rocky point. The town was just as I remembered, a handful of streets lined with colorful shops and cafes, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, the scent of salt air and pine trees mingling in the breeze. The Lighthouse Inn stood on a gentle slope overlooking the water, its weathered shingles and white trim giving it a timeless quality. Martha greeted me warmly, showing me to the harbor suite on the second floor with its private balcony and panoramic views. "Dinner's served in the main dining room from 6 to 8 if you're interested," she explained as she handed me the keys. "Or if you prefer privacy after your drive, I'd be happy to bring a tray up to your suite." The thoughtful offer nearly brought tears to my eyes after weeks of tension and vigilance. "The dining room sounds lovely," I managed. "Thank you, Martha." After she left, I unpacked slowly, arranging my clothes in the cedar-scented dresser and placing Richard's photograph on the nightstand. It was our favorite picture, taken on our 25th anniversary during a sailing trip on this very harbor. The sea breeze had tousled his silver hair, and his laugh was captured mid-motion, eyes crinkled with joy as he looked not at the camera but at me. "Well, here we are," I told his smiling image. "A little later than we planned, but we made it." That evening in the dining room, I met several of the inn's other guests. A retired professor researching local maritime history, a young couple celebrating their honeymoon, and a children's book illustrator seeking inspiration for her next project. The conversation flowed easily, centered on the town's attractions and history rather than personal details. For the first time in months, I felt the knot of tension in my shoulders begin to loosen. Here, I wasn't Barbara Johnson, the woman fighting a conservatorship battle with her manipulative son-in-law. I was simply a visitor enjoying a coastal town, anonymous and unburdened. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the gauzy curtains and the distant cry of seagulls. After breakfast in the inn's garden, I set out to reacquaint myself with Silver Springs. I wandered through art galleries and boutiques, chatted with shopkeepers who remembered me from previous visits with Richard, and eventually found myself on the harborfront path that led to the lighthouse. The path was more structured than I remembered, with informative plaques about local wildlife and maritime history placed at intervals along the route. As I paused to read about the harbor's role in 19th century fishing industries, a voice behind me spoke. "They added those signs last year as part of the historical preservation project." I turned to find an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes, his white hair pushed back from his forehead by the sea breeze. "They're very informative," I replied. He smiled, extending his hand. "Jack Harmon, harbor master, amateur historian, and professional busybody, according to my daughter." "Barbara Johnson," I said, shaking his offered hand. "Visitor, herb gardener, and professional avoider of problems, according to my best friend." His laugh was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Well, Barbara Johnson, you've picked a good place for avoiding problems. Not much happens in Silver Springs that isn't on the community bulletin board by noon." We fell into step together along the path, Jack pointing out changes to the harbor since my last visit. A new community sailing program for local kids, restoration work on the lighthouse keeper's cottage, plans for expanding the nature preserve on the point. "You seem to know everything about this place," I observed as we reached the lighthouse. "Occupational hazard of being harbor master for 30 years, he replied with a shrug. "That, and being born here. My family's been in Silver Springs since it was founded." "It must be special, having such deep roots in one place," I said. "It has its moments," he agreed. "Though sometimes I envy people like you who can choose their home based on what calls to them, not just where they happen to be born." The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. "How do you know Silver Springs is calling to me? Maybe I'm just a tourist." Jack's smile was knowing. "Tourists take photos of the lighthouse from a distance. They don't walk all the way out here. On a Tuesday morning, and they definitely don't stop to read every historical marker along the way. He paused. Besides, Martha mentioned you might be considering a more permanent arrangement in our little town. I made a mental note to have a word with Martha about small-town discretion. It's just an idea at this point, I hedged. I have some complications to resolve back home first. Don't we all? He said philosophically. Then, noticing my expression, he added, but I won't pry. Silver Springs will be here when you're ready, complications resolved or not. We parted at the lighthouse, Jack heading to the harbor office and me continuing along the coastal path that wound around. The point. His casual acceptance, of me, of the idea that everyone carried complications, was refreshing after months of navigating Tyler's manipulations and judgments. Over the next few days, I fell into a pleasant routine. Mornings were spent exploring the town and surrounding nature trails. Afternoons I devoted to researching local real estate, visiting open houses, and quietly investigating what it would take to transplant my herb business to a new location. Evenings were for reading on my private balcony, watching the sunset paint, the harbor in shades of gold and rose. I spoke with Emma daily, keeping her updated on my discoveries without pressuring her with any decisions about my potential relocation. She seemed genuinely pleased by my explorations, often suggesting areas to investigate or questions to ask about the local art scene. I might come visit you there, she said during one call. Once I've sorted things out here, it sounds like exactly the kind of place Dad would have loved. He did love it, I confirmed. And I think you would too. The gallery scene is small but vibrant, and there's a little art center that offers classes and studio space for local artists. A week into my stay, Jack invited me to join him for the weekly community dinner at the Harbor Boathouse, a tradition where locals brought potluck dishes and shared news and stories. Initially hesitant to insert myself into such an established community event, I was persuaded by Martha's assurance that visitors were always welcome. I prepared a simple herb focaccia, using fresh rosemary and thyme from the inn's garden, a recipe Richard had always loved. The boathouse was transformed for the evening. Long tables draped with checkered cloths and strung with twinkling lights that reflected off the harbor waters visible through the open doors. Jack introduced me to what felt like half the town: the librarian who ran a maritime history discussion group, the retired teacher who organized the community garden, the young couple who had recently opened a farm-to-table cafe on Main Street. To my surprise, I was welcomed not as a tourist or outsider, but as a potential neighbor. "We heard you're thinking of joining us permanently," said Eleanor, the white-haired librarian. "Martha says you're a master herbalist." "Martha seems to have told everyone everything about me," I observed wryly. Eleanor laughed. "Small towns run on information, my dear. Be grateful she's said only good things." "Is it always this inclusive?" I asked later, as Jack walked me back to the inn under a canopy of stars. "The way everyone immediately accepts newcomers?" He considered the question seriously. "Not always," he admitted. "Some folks take longer to warm up than others. But Silver Springs has learned that new blood keeps a small town alive. We've seen too many coastal communities become either exclusive enclaves for the wealthy or slowly die as young people leave and don't return. And which is Silver Springs?" "Neither, if we can help it," he said firmly. "We're working hard to stay affordable enough for families and vibrant enough to attract new residents with ideas and energy. It's a balancing act, but worth the effort." As we reached the inn, he hesitated. "There's a property I think you might want to see. It hasn't been officially listed yet. Old Harry Mackenzie is finally moving to his daughter's place in Portland, and his cottage on Bayberry Lane is going to be available soon. It's got good southern exposure for gardening and a small greenhouse. That's seen better days but has good bones." The description sounded ideal, almost too perfect. "Why tell me before it's listed?" I asked. "Because Harry doesn't want just anyone taking over the place he's lived in for 40 years. Jack said simply. He'd prefer someone who'd appreciate the gardens he and his late wife created. I mentioned you might be interested, and he's willing to show you around before making any decisions. The offer was tempting, but I was conscious of my unresolved situation back home. I don't know if my timeline will work, I admitted. The competency hearing is still 2 weeks away, Jack finished for me. Looking at a cottage doesn't commit you to anything. But not looking might mean missing an opportunity that feels right for you. His logic was compelling. The next day, I met Harry Mackenzie at his cottage on Bayberry Lane, a charming Cape Cod with weathered blue shingles and crisp white trim. At 78, Harry was spry and sharp-eyed, taking obvious pride in showing me through the gardens. He and his wife Margaret had cultivated over 4 decades. Raised beds are the secret, he confided as we toured the extensive herb garden. Easier on the back as you get older, and better drainage for most herbs. The cottage itself was modestly sized but thoughtfully designed, with a sun-filled kitchen that overlooked the back garden, a cozy living room with a riverstone fireplace, and 2 bedrooms upstairs with dormer windows that captured views of both the garden and, from the larger room, a slice of the harbor. The greenhouse was indeed in need of repair, its wooden frame weathered and some glass panes cracked, but I could immediately envision how it could be restored to support my herb business year-round. It's wonderful, I told Harry honestly. You and Margaret created something truly special here. His eyes misted slightly at the mention of his late wife. 52 years together, and 39 of them in this house. There are memories in every corner. He cleared his throat. That's why I'm particular about who takes it on next. Need to know it'll be properly appreciated. I understood his sentiment completely. Our homes weren't just structures. They were vessels for our lives, witnesses to our joys and sorrows. I'd want to continue the gardens, I told him. Expand them even. I've been growing and selling medicinal herbs for years. Harry nodded approvingly. Margaret would have liked that. She always said plants were the oldest medicine. As we finished the tour on the front porch, Harry fixed me with a direct gaze. Jack mentioned you've got some complications to sort out before making any decisions. Don't mean to pry, but are they the kind that resolve themselves, or the kind that follow you? The blunt question caught me off guard, but I appreciated his candor. The kind I'm actively resolving, I replied. A family situation that's difficult, but not insurmountable. He seemed satisfied with my answer. Well, I'm in no rush. Place isn't officially on the market yet, and won't be for another month or so. Take your time sorting things out, then let me know if you're interested in a more serious conversation. It was an unexpected gift. Time to resolve my situation with Tyler without the pressure of losing this perfect opportunity. I thanked Harry sincerely, promising to stay in touch regardless of my eventual decision. That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the harbor lights twinkle against the darkening sky, I called Emma to tell her about the cottage. It sounds perfect for you, Mom, she said warmly. I can picture you in that greenhouse, concocting your herb remedies and selling them at the Silver Springs Farmers Market. It's just an idea at this point, I reminded her. There's still the hearing to get through, and I don't want to make any major decisions until we know how that resolves. About that, Emma hesitated. I've been talking with Bethany. She thinks I should testify at your competency hearing. The suggestion took me by surprise. Testify? Why? Because I was there, Emma said simply. I saw how methodically you handled the situation with Tyler, how clear-headed and rational you were even when under extreme stress. My testimony would directly contradict his claims about your mental state. It made tactical sense, but I worried about the emotional cost to Emma. You'd have to face Tyler in court, I pointed out. Are you ready for that? She was quiet. For a moment. I think I need to, she finally said. Not just for you, but for myself. I've been hiding in Riverside, avoiding confrontation, letting Bethany handle all communication. At some point, I have to face him directly and stand my ground." The strength in her voice brought tears to my eyes. My daughter was finding her way back to herself, reclaiming her power just as I was reclaiming mine. "Then we'll face him together," I said, my resolve strengthening. "And after that, we'll both decide what comes next, whether that's Silver Springs for me, divorce proceedings for you, or whatever other paths call to us." As I ended the call, I gazed out at the lighthouse, beams sweeping across the dark water, a steady rhythm of light cutting through the night. For the first time since discovering Tyler and Emma's plot to take my home, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Not just relieved to have escaped a trap, but excited about the new possibilities taking shape on the horizon. The basement. Tyler had tried to relegate me to had become a metaphor for limitation and control. But here, in this coastal town with its lighthouse beacon and welcoming community, I was discovering that sometimes the best response to those who would confine you isn't just resistance, it's expansion into spaces they never imagined you might occupy. The morning I was scheduled to return to Maple Grove for the competency hearing dawned with an unexpected fog that shrouded Silver Springs Harbor, making the lighthouse beam necessary even as the sun rose. There was something fitting about the weather, a visual reminder that clarity often emerges gradually, especially when navigating difficult passages. I'd grown surprisingly attached to the Lighthouse Inn during my 3-week stay. Martha had become more than just an innkeeper, offering local insights and quiet companionship on evenings when the weight of my situation felt heaviest. Jack had introduced me to his wide circle of friends, each of whom had welcomed me without reservation or judgment. And Harry Mackenzie's cottage on Bayberry Lane had taken root in my imagination as a very real possibility for my future. "You'll come back when this legal nonsense is settled?" Martha asked as she helped me load my suitcases into the car. "I think I will," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Whatever happens at the hearing, I need to see this through to its conclusion. But after that..." Martha smiled knowingly. "After that, Bayberry Lane awaits. Harry told me he's holding off listing until you've had a proper chance to consider it." "That's incredibly generous of him." "It's self-interest, really," Martha confided. "He wants neighbors who'll keep Silver Springs vibrant, not just wealthy weekenders who'll drive up property values and leave their houses empty 9 months of the year." Jack arrived as we were saying our goodbyes, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A little something for the road," he explained, handing it to me. "And a reminder of what's waiting for you here." I opened it to find a beautifully framed watercolor of the Silver Springs Lighthouse at sunset, painted with remarkable skill and sensitivity. "Jack, this is beautiful," I breathed. "I didn't know you were an artist." He shrugged modestly. "Harbor master by profession, painter by passion. My wife always said I needed something to keep me occupied during winter storms when the harbor's quiet." The gift touched me deeply, not just for its beauty, but for what it represented. A community that had embraced me sight unseen, offering friendship and possibility when I needed it most. The 4-hour drive back to Maple Grove gave me time to mentally prepare for what lay ahead. Michael had called the previous evening with updates. Dr. Martinez's evaluation had been formally submitted to the court, providing a strong foundation for dismissing Tyler's petition. Emma had arrived from Riverside and was staying with Susan, preparing for her potential testimony. And most significantly, the judge assigned to the case, the Honorable Clara Ramirez, had a reputation for low tolerance of frivolous filings and a particular interest in cases involving elder rights. "We're in a strong position," Michael had assured me. "But be prepared for Tyler to make this as uncomfortable as possible. His attorney has indicated they plan to introduce evidence of erratic behavior and financial mismanagement." "What kind of evidence could they possibly have?" I'd asked, genuinely puzzled. "They're being deliberately vague, which suggests they don't have much," Michael replied. But don't underestimate Tyler's capacity for manipulation. He's likely crafted a narrative that paints your completely reasonable actions as signs of mental decline. As I crossed the city limits into Maple Grove, a familiar tension crept back into my shoulders. I'd experienced 3 weeks of peace in Silver Springs, 3 weeks of being simply Barbara, herb gardener, and potential new resident. Now, I was returning to a place where I was defined by conflict. Tyler's target, Emma's mother, the woman fighting a conservatorship battle. I drove directly to Susan's house, where Emma was waiting on the front porch. The changes in her were subtle but significant. She stood straighter, her gaze more direct, her smile more genuine as she embraced me. "You look wonderful," I told her, stepping back to take in her appearance. "Riverside agrees with you." "It's not just Riverside," she replied, leading me inside. "It's therapy and distance and perspective." She paused in the hallway, turning to face me directly. "And it's having a mother who showed me what standing up for yourself actually looks like, not just in words, but in actions." Her words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Throughout this ordeal, I'd worried constantly about the impact on our relationship, fearing that my boundaries might be interpreted as rejection. To hear that my actions had instead served as a positive example felt like a burden lifting. Susan greeted me with a tight hug and immediate practical concerns. "You must be exhausted from the drive. I've got the guest room ready and there's soup warming on the stove whenever you're hungry." "Actually, I think I need to see my house first," I said, "just to check that everything's okay before tomorrow." Susan and Emma exchanged a glance that immediately put me on alert. "What is it?" I asked. "What's happened?" "Nothing serious," Susan assured me quickly. "But there have been some incidents since you left." "Incidents?" Emma nodded. "Tyler's been driving by the house several times a day, and last week one of the security cameras caught him trying to peer through the windows. He knows I've been gone?" "We think so," Susan confirmed. "The cameras have recorded him circling the property at odd hours. Deputy Wilson increased patrols after we reported it, and that seemed to discourage him for a while. But he's been getting bolder as the hearing approaches." A chill ran through me at the thought of Tyler's escalating behavior. "Has he tried to break in?" "Not exactly," Susan said. "But 2 nights ago, the motion sensors went off around 2 a.m. The security footage shows someone in the backyard, near your garden. The figure was wearing a hoodie pulled up, so we can't be absolutely certain it was Tyler, but who else would it be?" I finished for her. "Deputy Wilson took a report, but without clear facial identification there wasn't much they could do except note the trespassing," Emma explained. I took a deep breath, processing this new information. "All the more reason to check on things before tomorrow. Will you come with me?" 20 minutes later, we pulled into my driveway, Susan's car following close behind. From the outside, everything looked normal. The lawn was neatly trimmed thanks to Susan's care, late summer flowers were blooming in the front beds, and the security system appeared intact. Inside was a different story. It wasn't immediately obvious what was wrong. The furniture was in place, nothing seemed to be missing, and the security system hadn't registered any breaches. But as I moved through the rooms, a sense of wrongness grew stronger. Small things were off. Books slightly rearranged on shelves. Cushions not quite where I'd left them, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air. "Someone's been in here," I said quietly to Susan and Emma as we stood in the living room. "Are you sure?" Susan asked, glancing around. "The system would have alerted if any doors or windows were opened." "I'm positive," I insisted. "Things have been moved. Not obviously, but enough that I can tell." Emma looked troubled. "Could Tyler have a key we don't know about? Maybe one he had made before you changed the locks?" The locksmith assured me they installed a completely new system with unique keys, I recalled. And even if Tyler somehow had a key, the security system would have recorded the door opening. "Unless he knew the code," Emma said slowly. stared at her. The only people who know the code are you, me, and Susan. And whoever might have been watching when any of us entered it, Susan pointed out. The keypad is visible from the side window near the front door. If someone was determined enough. The implication was disturbing. Tyler might have been observing my home much more closely than we realized, learning patterns and access codes, perhaps waiting for me to leave before making his move. We should call Deputy Wilson, I decided, pulling out my phone. She arrived within 20 minutes, taking a thorough report and examining the house herself. I don't see any signs of forced entry, she confirmed. But that doesn't mean someone hasn't been inside. If they had the code, they could enter and exit without triggering alarms. Can you dust for fingerprints or something? Emma asked. Deputy Wilson smiled gently. This isn't quite like TV crime shows. Fingerprinting an entire house isn't practical, especially when Mr. Wilson previously lived here legally and would have legitimate reasons for his prints to be present. So there's nothing you can do? I asked, frustrated. I didn't say that, she replied. I've documented your report, which establishes a pattern when combined with the previous trespassing incidents. I'd also recommend changing your security code immediately, and perhaps adding cameras inside the house as well as outside. The suggestion made my skin crawl. The idea of needing surveillance inside my own home felt like a violation in itself, but I nodded in agreement. Safety had to take priority over comfort right now. I don't think you should stay here tonight, Susan said firmly after Deputy Wilson left. Come back to my place. We can deal with additional security measures after the hearing. I wanted to argue, to insist on reclaiming my space immediately, but practicality won out. One more night away wouldn't change anything significant, and the thought of sleeping in a house that Tyler might have violated was deeply unsettling. Back at Susan's house, we spent the evening reviewing our strategy for the hearing with Michael, who joined us for dinner. Emma practiced her potential testimony, speaking with remarkable clarity about the changes she'd observed in Tyler's behavior and the manipulative tactics he'd employed against both of us. "You're sure you're ready for this?" I asked her privately when Michael stepped outside to take a phone call. "Facing Tyler in court won't be easy." Emma's expression was resolute. "I'm not just ready, Mom. I need to do this, for both of us, but especially for myself. Standing up to Tyler in court is part of reclaiming my voice." I squeezed her hand, immensely proud of the strength she was discovering within herself. Whatever happened at tomorrow's hearing, Emma had already achieved a personal victory by refusing to be silenced or manipulated any longer. That night, I slept fitfully, my dreams filled with shadowy figures moving through my house, rearranging my belongings in subtle ways designed to make me doubt my own perceptions. I woke before dawn, exhausted but determined to face whatever challenges the day might bring. The county courthouse was an imposing structure of red brick and white columns, designed to convey permanence and authority. As we climbed the wide stone steps, I spotted Tyler and his attorney waiting near the entrance. He was impeccably dressed in a conservative suit, his expression solemn and concerned, the perfect picture of a worried relative rather than a manipulative opportunist. "Remember," Michael murmured as we approached, "he's playing a role now. Don't let it provoke you." Tyler nodded stiffly as we passed, his eyes widening slightly when he noticed Emma at my side. Whatever reaction he might have had was quickly masked as his attorney led him inside. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with polished wooden benches and subdued lighting. Judge Ramirez, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair and penetrating dark eyes, entered promptly at 9 a.m., commanding immediate respect with her no-nonsense demeanor. The proceedings began with formal introductions and a brief overview of the petition. Tyler's attorney, Lawrence Blackwell, spoke first, presenting his client's case with practiced concern. "Your Honor, this petition arises from Mr. Wilson's genuine concern for his mother-in-law's welfare," Blackwell began. "Over the past 6 months, He has observed increasingly erratic behavior, including paranoid suspicions about family members, impulsive financial decisions, and irrational hostility toward those attempting to provide support and care. I maintained a neutral expression, though internally I marveled at how skillfully he was reframing Tyler's manipulative actions as benevolent concern. Mrs. Johnson abruptly transferred all household utilities into my client's name without discussion. Blackwell continued. She installed extensive security systems without justification, forcibly evicted family members who were providing assistance, and most recently, abandoned her home without notice, leaving bills unpaid and property unsecured. Each accusation was a twisted version of the truth, presenting my protective measures as evidence of instability rather than rational responses to exploitation. Furthermore, Blackwell concluded, Mrs. Johnson has recently been making statements about leaving her established community to move to a distant location where she has no connections or support system, a decision that demonstrates poor judgment and potential vulnerability to influence. Michael rose next, his calm professionalism a stark contrast to Blackwell's theatrical concern. Your Honor, we categorically reject these characterizations of Mrs. Johnson's actions, he stated firmly. What Mr. Blackwell describes as erratic behavior was, in fact, a series of appropriate, measured responses to documented financial exploitation. He then methodically dismantled each of Blackwell's claims, providing context that transformed the narrative entirely. The utility transfer became a reasonable financial boundary after discovering unauthorized withdrawals from my accounts. The security system was a prudent response to Tyler's increasingly intrusive behavior. The eviction followed the discovery of their plan to take my home and place me in assisted living against my will. Far from demonstrating impaired judgment, Michael concluded, Mrs. Johnson's actions show remarkable clarity and appropriate self-protection in the face of exploitation. As for her exploration of a potential relocation, this represents thoughtful, long-term planning rather than impulsivity, as confirmed by Dr. Martinez's comprehensive evaluation. Judge Ramirez listened attentively to both presentations before addressing Tyler directly. Mr. Wilson, you initiated this petition claiming concern for Mrs. Johnson's cognitive capacity and financial judgment, she noted. Yet the court-appointed evaluation by Dr. Martinez finds no evidence of cognitive impairment or financial mismanagement. How do you reconcile your petition with these findings? Tyler leaned forward, his expression earnest. Your Honor, with all due respect to Dr. Martinez, her evaluation provides only a snapshot. My concerns are based on patterns of behavior I've observed over months of close contact. Mrs. Johnson may present well in a structured evaluation setting while still demonstrating concerning judgment in day-to-day decisions. Such as, the judge prompted, such as transferring utilities without discussion, installing surveillance equipment, making accusations of financial impropriety, and severing family connections that have been central to her life for decades, Tyler replied, smoothly. These aren't the actions of someone thinking clearly about their best interests. Judge Ramirez turned to me. Mrs. Johnson, would you care to respond to these characterizations of your decisions? I took a deep breath, focusing on maintaining the calm, rational demeanor that would best counter Tyler's narrative. Your Honor, each action Mr. Wilson describes was a direct response to discovering his deception and exploitation, I explained. I transferred the utilities to his name after finding evidence that he and my daughter had moved into my home with no intention of leaving, despite claiming it was a temporary arrangement during renovations on their house, renovations that were never actually happening. I continued methodically through each point, describing the overheard conversation about taking my home, the discovery of unauthorized withdrawals from my accounts, and the credit card application submitted in my name without my knowledge or consent. The security system was installed after repeated boundary violations, I noted, and my exploration of Silver Springs as a potential new home represents thoughtful planning for my future, not impulsivity or confusion. Judge Ramirez nodded thoughtfully before addressing Michael. Counsel, you mentioned documentation of financial exploitation. Is this material part of your filed response? Yes, Your Honor, Michael confirmed, indicating the exhibits we had submitted. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, evidence of the fraudulent credit card application, and documentation of Mr. Wilson's financial difficulties that motivated his attempt to gain control of Mrs. Johnson's assets. For the next hour, the judge methodically examined each piece of evidence from both sides. Tyler's attorney attempted to minimize the unauthorized withdrawals as family loans that had simply not been properly documented, while presenting my security measures as evidence of paranoia rather than reasonable precaution. When Emma was called to testify, she walked to the witness stand with steady determination. Under Michael's gentle questioning, she described the gradual escalation of Tyler's controlling behavior, both toward her and toward me. At first, it seemed like he was just trying to help, she explained, suggesting updates to Mom's house, offering to manage finances because of his background in investment banking. But over time, I realized he was systematically isolating both of us from friends and support systems while creating financial dependence. When asked about the plan to take my house, Emma's voice wavered slightly but remained clear. Tyler convinced me it was for Mom's own good, that the house was too much for her to maintain, that she'd be happier in a senior community. I'm ashamed that I went along with it, that I didn't recognize how he was manipulating both of us until Mom confronted us directly. During cross-examination, Blackwell attempted to portray Emma as confused and emotionally unstable, suggesting her testimony was unreliable due to the stress of marital difficulties. Emma remained poised under pressure, acknowledging the emotional challenges while standing firmly by her account of events. Yes, I've been under stress, she admitted. The stress of recognizing how I participated in a plan to manipulate my own mother out of her home. The stress of discovering my husband had been making unauthorized withdrawals from her account. The stress of realizing the relationship I thought was a partnership was actually a systematic exercise in control. Her calm clarity seemed to impress Judge Ramirez, who intervened when Blackwell's questioning became increasingly aggressive. Mr. Blackwell, the witness has been quite consistent in her testimony, the judge noted. Unless you have specific factual challenges rather than general attempts to undermine her credibility, I suggest you conclude your cross-examination. By early afternoon, Judge Ramirez called a brief recess to review all the evidence before issuing her ruling. As we waited in the hallway outside the courtroom, I noticed Tyler standing alone near a window, his attorney engaged in conversation with a clerk several yards away. Impulsively, I approached him. Michael started to intervene, but I gestured for him to stay back. This was a conversation I needed to have. Barbara, Tyler acknowledged stiffly as I joined him at the window. Come to gloat before the judge rules? No, I replied calmly. I came to ask you a question that's been bothering me since this all began. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. Did you ever actually care about Emma? I asked. Or was she just a means to an end from the beginning? Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or wounded pride. You've always underestimated me, Barbara. Always seen me as some kind of villain in your family story. That's not an answer, I pointed out. I love Emma, he insisted, though even now the words sounded rehearsed. Everything I did was for our future together, including taking her mother's home, isolating her from friends, controlling her access to money. That's not love, Tyler. That's ownership. His expression hardened. You never gave me a chance. From day one, you were threatened by my relationship with Emma, afraid of losing your control over her. The accusation might have landed if it held any truth, but I recognized it for what it was. Another attempt to manipulate the narrative, to position himself as the victim rather than the aggressor. I welcomed you into my family, I reminded. Him. Into my home. I trusted you with the most precious person in my life. You betrayed that trust in calculated, systematic ways. And now you're taking her away, he said bitterly, turning her against me. Emma is making her own choices, I corrected gently. That's what scares you, isn't it? Not that I'm influencing her, but that I'm not. That she's thinking for herself and recognizing the relationship for what it truly was. Before he could respond, the court officer announced that Judge Ramirez was ready to deliver her ruling. Our brief confrontation ended unresolved, but I felt a strange sense of closure nonetheless. I had faced Tyler directly, outside the structured environment of the courtroom, and maintained my clarity and boundaries. Back in the courtroom, Judge Ramirez wasted no time delivering her decision. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, including Dr. Martinez's comprehensive evaluation, bank records, testimony from all parties, and the documented timeline of events, I find no basis for establishing a conservatorship over Barbara Johnson, she stated firmly. Relief washed over me as she continued, addressing Tyler directly. Mr. Wilson, this court views your petition with significant concern. The evidence strongly suggests that rather than acting out of genuine concern for Mrs. Johnson's welfare, you have attempted to use the legal system to regain control over assets and living arrangements after your previous efforts were thwarted. She shuffled through some papers before continuing. While today's proceeding was limited to the question of conservatorship, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential financial exploitation charges. Additionally, I am issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting you from approaching Mrs. Johnson's residence or contacting her directly. Tyler's face flushed with anger, but his attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. This matter is dismissed, Judge Ramirez concluded, bringing down her gavel with finality. Outside the courthouse, a light rain had begun to fall, washing the world clean in that particular way that always reminded me of new beginnings. Emma hugged me tightly, her relief palpable. It's really over, she whispered. This part is, I agreed. Now we both get to decide what comes next. Michael was more cautious in his assessment as we walked to the parking lot. The restraining order provides immediate protection, but don't underestimate Tyler's capacity for finding loopholes or alternative approaches. I strongly recommend maintaining your security measures for the time being. And my house? I asked. Is it safe to return now? With the new security code and additional cameras, yes, he confirmed. But perhaps having someone stay with you for a few days would be prudent. I'll stay, Emma offered immediately. I squeezed her hand gratefully. Just for a night or two. Then you need to get back to Riverside and your own life. I'll be fine. That evening, Emma and I returned to my house together, accompanied by Susan, who insisted on helping us check every room and closet before departing. We changed the security code, added interior cameras to the system, and made sure all windows and doors were securely locked. Despite these precautions, the house felt different to me now, less like the sanctuary it had once been, and more like a space that had been compromised. The subtle wrongness I'd sensed the day before persisted, a feeling that someone had moved through my most private spaces, touching my belongings, invading my security. Are you okay, Mom? Emma asked as we sat in the living room after dinner, both of us unusually quiet. I'm fine, I assured her automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, that's not entirely true. I don't feel unsafe exactly, but I don't feel at home anymore either. She nodded, understanding. It's like when someone's read your diary. Even if nothing's missing, something's been taken. Her perceptiveness touched me. Exactly. The sense of violation lingers. So, what are you thinking? She asked, curling her legs beneath her on the sofa. About Silver Springs, I mean. I gazed around the living room, taking in the familiar contours of the home that had sheltered me through so many life chapters. I think it might be time for a new beginning, I admitted. Not running away from problems, but moving toward possibilities. "Tell me about Harry's cottage again," Emma prompted, her expression warm with interest. As I described the blue-shingled Cape Cod with its extensive gardens and potential for expanding my herb business, I felt a growing certainty that this was the right path forward. The cottage on Bayberry Lane represented not just a change of location, but a reclamation of my future on my own terms. "I could see you there," Emma said when I finished. "It sounds like it was designed specifically for you." "What about you?" I asked. "What's next in your journey?" She gazed thoughtfully into her tea. "Bethany thinks I should file for divorce. She says Tyler's financial entanglements and control issues will only make things more complicated if I wait." "And what do you think?" "I think she's right," Emma said softly. "Whatever I once felt for Tyler has been buried under too many lies and manipulations. There's no foundation left to rebuild on." We sat in companionable silence for a while, each contemplating the significant transitions ahead. Despite the challenges we'd faced, or perhaps because of them, I felt closer to my daughter than I had in years. We had weathered a storm together and emerged stronger, more authentic versions of ourselves. The following morning, I woke early, drawn outside by the golden light of dawn spreading across my garden. As I walked among the herbs I'd nurtured for years, touching their fragrant leaves and breathing in their familiar scents, I made my decision. When Emma joined me, still in her pajamas with a cup of coffee cradled in her hands, I shared my plan. "I'm going to call Harry today," I told her. "About the cottage on Bayberry Lane." She smiled, unsurprised. "I thought you might. It feels right, doesn't it?" "It does," I confirmed. "This house holds wonderful memories, but it's time for a new chapter. And with the real estate market as strong as it is, the proceeds from selling will give me plenty of cushion to renovate the cottage and expand the greenhouse." Emma hesitated, then asked the question I knew had been on her mind. "What about me? Where do I fit in your new life?" I took her hand. "Wherever you want to fit, sweetheart. There's a second bedroom in the cottage that could be yours whenever you need it. And Silver Springs has a thriving arts community that might interest you professionally. But I don't expect you to follow me or make your decisions based on mine. You're finding your own path now." Relief softened her features. "I'd like to visit often. Maybe even spend some extended time there once my divorce is finalized. But you're right. I need to figure out my own next steps." Over the next 2 weeks, events moved with surprising speed. Harry Mackenzie accepted my offer on the cottage, delighted that his beloved gardens would continue to be tended by someone who understood their value. My Maple Grove home went on the market and received multiple offers within days, eventually selling to a young family who fell in love with the garden and Richard's handcrafted built-ins. Emma filed for divorce, a process Bethany warned might become contentious given Tyler's history of control. "He's not going to let go easily," she cautioned. "Be prepared for delays and possibly vindictive tactics." Despite this warning, Emma remained resolute. She extended her stay in Riverside, accepting a part-time position at the gallery that allowed her to build her portfolio while supporting herself financially. We spoke daily, sharing updates on our parallel journeys of transition and renewal. 6 weeks after the hearing, I stood in the empty living room of my Maple Grove home, saying a final goodbye to the space that had sheltered so many important moments of my life. The furniture had been either sold, donated, or packed for the move to Silver Springs. The walls were bare where family photos had hung. Only the garden remained as I had tended it, a parting gift to the young family who would soon make this house their own. I walked through each room one last time, touching door frames and windowsills, acknowledging the memories each space contained. Richard teaching Emma to ride a bike in the driveway visible from the kitchen window. Holiday gatherings around the dining table with friends and extended family. Quiet evenings reading in the living room, Richard in his chair, me on the sofa, companionable silence between us. These memories wouldn't stay with the house. They would travel with me to Silver Springs, informing but not limiting my new life there. The past wasn't a place to escape from or a sanctuary to hide within. It was the foundation upon which I would build whatever came next. As I locked the front door for the final time, Susan arrived to accompany me on the drive to Silver Springs. Emma would join us the following weekend to help with unpacking and settling in. "Ready?" Susan asked, eyeing me with gentle concern. "Ready," I confirmed, surprising myself with how true the word felt. We were halfway to Silver Springs when my phone rang, Emma calling with excitement in her voice. "You won't believe this," she began without preamble. "Tyler's being investigated for fraud at his firm. Apparently he's been misrepresenting investment returns to clients for years. It's all over the local business news." The revelation was surprising, yet somehow not. The financial desperation that had driven Tyler to target my home had clearly extended beyond his personal affairs into his professional conduct. "Bethany says this might actually simplify the divorce," Emma continued. "His attention will be divided, and he'll likely want to settle quickly rather than fight a battle on multiple fronts." As we continued our journey north, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out had I not discovered Tyler and Emma's plot when I did. Without that overheard conversation, without the evidence I gathered and the boundaries I established, I might now be living in a tiny apartment at Sunset Haven while Tyler and Emma occupied my home, at least until his fraudulent activities eventually caught up with him. The basement Tyler had tried to relegate me to had instead become the catalyst for a complete reinvention of my life. The utility bills I'd transferred to his name had been the first crack in his carefully constructed facade of control. What had begun as a defensive maneuver to protect what was mine had ultimately opened the door to possibilities I hadn't imagined for myself. As we crested the final hill overlooking Silver Springs Harbor, the late afternoon sun illuminated the lighthouse and the colorful buildings nestled between mountains and sea. Jack Harmon was waiting at the cottage on Bayberry Lane, having promised to help with the initial moving in and to introduce me to neighbors I hadn't yet met. Martha from the Lighthouse Inn had organized a small welcome dinner for that evening. "Just a few people to make you feel at home right away," she'd insisted when I tried to decline, overwhelmed by the thought of socializing after the emotional day of leaving Maple Grove. But as Susan and I pulled into the driveway of the blue-shingled cottage that was now mine, I felt a surge of anticipation rather than fatigue. The gardens were bursting with early autumn color, the greenhouse standing ready for renovation, the dormer windows seeming to welcome me with their bright reflections of the setting sun. This wasn't just a refuge from Tyler's manipulations or a consolation prize for the home I'd left behind. It was a deliberate choice, a new beginning crafted from clarity and strength rather than fear or compromise. Whatever challenges lay ahead, helping Emma through her divorce, establishing my herb business in a new community, creating fresh connections and friendships, I would face them with the confidence of someone who had rediscovered her own worth and boundaries. Tyler had tried to make me clean the basement, but I had already changed all the utility bills to his name. More importantly, I had changed the narrative of my life from one of potential victimhood to one of active choice and self-determination. The basement he had intended as my diminishment had instead become the foundation for my expansion into a future entirely of my own design. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.